I Bible Story Volume 5. I've been noticing that my book, apparently I have, is offset. Some of the paintings and pictures, it looks like in the next part of this book is all blurry, extra blurry. Okay, so we're going to start with part 2. That's where we're at. And this is the illustration that we have in part 2. Okay. This one, this was by Russell Harlan, and it says in the caption, when the water of the city of Jericho became bitter and unfit to use, Elijah called for some salt, which he poured into the source of the stream, and God made the water good to drink. So that was him pouring salt into the water at the source of the spring. Okay, for everybody to drink. Okay, part 2, story 1, Bad Boys and the Bear. Now, this is Elisha with the S, not with the J. So it's going to sound like I say the same word, but it's not. Elisha did his best to explain what had happened to Elijah with the J. But people wouldn't believe him. Even the young men in the school of the prophets at Jericho found it hard to understand how their beloved master could have been taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire and a whirlwind. They were sure that even so he must have fallen somewhere, and maybe upon the mountain or into some valley, and they wanted to go search for him. Elisha told them not to, for they would only waste their time. But they went just the same, all 50 of them. 3 days they sought for Elijah, but without success. One day the elders of the city of Jericho came to Elisha and asked him if he could do something about their water supply. It had a bad taste, they said, and was no good for irrigation. Plants wouldn't grow in it. Elisha was glad to help. He called for a vessel of salt and took it to the place where the spring bubbled out of turn the page, the ground. He poured the salt and said, thus saith the Lord, I heal these waters. There shall not be from hence any more death or barren land. So the waters were healed unto this day. That stream is still flowing, and the water is still sweet. I would like to go see it, but okay. But let's get back to the story. I know you drink some of it. I know, for I drank some of it one day when visiting there some years ago. That's what the writer said, Mr. Maxwell. Leaving the people of Jericho very happy, Elisha made his way back to Bethel. As he approached the city, to his surprise, there came running towards him a group of unruly boys, shouting, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. So the story of Elijah, translation, had reached here already, and this is what the people thought of it. Clearly, they didn't believe a word of his report. They were laughing at the idea of anybody going to heaven in a fiery chariot. These rude youngsters were actually telling him to go up there too. Elisha saw that it was all part of the plan to wreck his work. His enemies wanted to make him a laughingstock of the country, and he did not permit it, nor could not permit it, nor could he allow so solemn, so beautiful an event as his master's triumph entry into heaven to be made a subject of scornful mirth. This was too much. These bad boys must be taught a lesson. So as the crowd of scoffing youngsters followed him, chanting, "Go up, baldhead," Elisha turned back to look at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. In other words, he asked God to deal with them as he saw fit. As he did so, two she-bears came slurking out of the nearby woods. Suddenly the mocking ceased, and the laughter turned to screams of terror as the boys fled for their lives. But the bears caught up with them and mauled 42 of them. How badly they were hurt we are not told, but it's safe to say that they all learned a lesson that day which they never forget. Never again should they treat a man of God with disrespect. Meanwhile, Elisha went on his way and came to Mount Carmel, where God had come so near to his master. The fire had fallen from heaven, and the fire had fallen from heaven. It was a good place to go at the beginning of his ministry. Um, I've also heard other stories that why they were calling him "Go Up, Bald Head" is because since there were very ungodly people, that those priests would shave their heads and would go up to a high place and pray. And so they probably were thinking that he was the opposite of the man of God. And then I have a picture of little boy, an illustration, and the bears. There's a 2-pager down at the bottom. And there he looking at them and the she bears and them hollering at him. And yeah, Mount Carmel would be a good place for him to start his ministry. Okay, that was the end of part 2, story 1. And of course, break time. Hope some of these nuggets were good. And nuggets. But I got that from a preacher I like to watch. But it's break time. And then we'll go back for the rest of it in just a minute.